The rain poured heavily as Ethan drove down the winding road leading to Blackwood Manor. The mansion, hidden deep in the countryside, had been abandoned for decades. Now, it was his. A surprise inheritance from a distant relative he had never met. The letter had arrived mysteriously, no lawyer, no formalities, just a key and a note. Blackwood Manor belongs to you now. Be careful what you seek. The words had stuck with him, but Ethan wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. He was a journalist, a man of facts, and he saw this as an opportunity. Maybe he could write a book about the history of the house. As he approached, the massive iron gates groaned open, as if reluctant to let him in. The mansion stood in the distance, its silhouette dark against the stormy sky. A place that once had grandeur was now decayed, ivy crawled up the stone walls, and shattered windows hinted at years of neglect. Lightning illuminated the scene for a brief second, and Ethan swore he saw a figure standing in one of the upper windows. He blinked. Gone. Just his imagination. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of damp wood. His footsteps echoed as he walked through the grand foyer, lined with paintings of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow him. A grand staircase led up to the second floor, where the bedrooms were. He would explore later. Dropping his bag on a table, he pulled out a flashlight and his notebook. His plan was simple: spend a few nights here, document everything, and prove once and for all that the ghost stories surrounding Blackwood Manor were nothing more than folklore. As he wandered through the dimly lit halls, he noticed something strange. The furniture, though covered in dust, seemed untouched. The beds upstairs were made, the books on the shelves were in perfect order, and a fire had been lit recently in the grand fireplace. Someone had been here. His heart pounded as he moved deeper into the house. Then, he saw it, a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. Inside was a small study, and on the desk, a journal lay open. The ink was fresh, the words written in neat cursive. He arrived. Just like they said he would. He doesn't know the truth yet. A cold chill ran down Ethan's spine. Thunder rumbled outside. Then came a sound from upstairs. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Ethan turned off his flashlight and held his breath. He wasn't alone. Ethan's pulse quickened as the footsteps above him grew louder. Whoever, or whatever, was upstairs wasn't in a hurry. The slow, deliberate pace echoed through the house, sending chills down his spine. For a long moment, he stood frozen in the study, staring at the open journal. The ink was fresh. Someone had written in it recently. But who? Gathering his courage, he switched his flashlight back on and stepped into the hallway. The old wooden floor creaked beneath his weight, but the sound of the footsteps had stopped. The house had returned to an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder outside. Taking a deep breath, he ascended the grand staircase. The upper floor smelled of aged wood and forgotten time. There were several doors lining the hallway, their brass handles dulled with age. Ethan hesitated before reaching for the first one. It opened with a groan. Inside was a bedroom, untouched by time. A large canopy bed stood against the far wall, the heavy curtains drawn closed. Dust floated in the air as he stepped inside. Something felt off, as if the room was holding its breath. Then he saw it. A mirror on the opposite wall reflected the room perfectly, except for one detail. There was a figure standing in the corner. Ethan spun around, but the room was empty. His throat tightened. Slowly, he turned back to the mirror. The figure was still there. A tall man, dressed in an old-fashioned black suit, his face obscured by shadow. Ethan took a cautious step forward. The figure remained motionless. Then, in a swift, unnatural movement, its head snapped toward him. Ethan stumbled backward, hitting the nightstand. A loud crash shattered the silence as a lamp fell to the floor. His heart pounded as he scrambled out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Gasping for breath, he leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of what he had just seen. It had to be a trick of the light. Or maybe exhaustion was playing with his mind. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. That thing in the mirror had seen him. Regaining his composure, he moved further down the hallway. The last door on the right stood slightly open, revealing what looked like an old library. Ethan hesitated before stepping inside. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books covered in dust. In the center of the room stood a massive wooden desk, papers scattered across it. But what caught his attention was a portrait above the fireplace. It was of the same man from the mirror. A small brass plaque beneath the painting read, Victor Blackwood, 1892–1923. Ethan frowned. If Victor Blackwood had died in 1923, then why did it feel like he had never left? His eyes drifted back to the desk. Among the old documents was another journal, bound in black leather. He flipped it open and immediately recognized the same neat cursive handwriting from the study. He arrived. Just like they said he would. He doesn't know the truth yet. But soon, he will understand why he was called here. And why he can never leave. Ethan's hands trembled as he turned the page. The house chose him. A floorboard creaked behind him. Slowly, he turned around. The door to the library was now closed. Ethan's breath hitched as he stared at the closed door. He was sure, absolutely sure, that he had left it open. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He stepped forward cautiously, reaching for the handle. Just as his fingers brushed against the brass, a whisper echoed through the room. "You shouldn't have come." Ethan spun around, his flashlight beam shaking. The room was empty. But the whisper had been real. It had come from inside the library. Panic set in. He yanked the door open and stumbled into the hallway. The air was colder now, thick with something unnatural. He needed to get out. He needed to leave now. His footsteps pounded down the staircase. As he reached the grand foyer, a powerful gust of wind slammed the front doors shut. The windows rattled violently, and the chandelier above flickered ominously. Ethan rushed to the door, gripping the handle with both hands. He twisted, pulled, shoved, nothing. It wouldn't budge. He was trapped. A sound echoed through the house. Footsteps. Descending. Slow. Deliberate. Ethan turned, his heart hammering against his ribs. At the top of the staircase stood a figure. Tall, dressed in an old black suit. The same one from the mirror. The same one from the painting. Victor Blackwood. But his face was wrong. Twisted, hollow, his eyes nothing more than endless black voids. And he was smiling. Ethan staggered back, searching desperately for an escape. Then he remembered, the study. The journal. The house chose him. It had never been an inheritance. It had been a trap. Blackwood Manor hadn't been given to him. It had been waiting for him. The whispers grew louder now, voices overlapping, chanting words he couldn't understand. The walls trembled, the floor beneath him cracked. The house was closing in, consuming him. Ethan turned and ran. He didn't know where he was going, down a hallway, through a doorway, deeper into the manor's grasp. The rooms twisted around him, corridors stretched impossibly long, doors that had once led outside now led to endless halls. Then, he saw it, a mirror at the end of the hallway. But it wasn't reflecting the house. It was reflecting him. Only, he wasn't moving. His reflection stood still, staring back at him, his expression frozen in terror. Then, it reached out. Ethan screamed as the hands in the mirror grabbed him, pulling him forward. The world around him blurred. Cold fingers wrapped around his throat, dragging him into the abyss. The last thing he saw was Victor Blackwood standing in the hallway, watching with that same eerie smile. And then, darkness. Days passed. Weeks. Months. The manor remained silent. Waiting. Then, one night, the grand iron gates creaked open again. A woman stepped out of a car, holding an envelope in her hand. A letter. A key. Her name was written on it. The letter simply read: Blackwood Manor belongs to you now. Be careful what you seek.